know whether, I'm just going to ask you folks toward the back of the room, can you hear me? Okay? Thank you very much. I want to welcome all of you here this evening. We, this afternoon, hosted a similar meeting for all faculty and staff. And we had a group at least this size this afternoon for our meeting. We have a crisis in education. The New York State budget is going to have serious impact on the Northeastern Clinton Central School District, and that's why we're here tonight to talk about that. Jim, I'm going to ask you if you could, can you turn that down just a little bit and get some feedback from here? Okay. Can you still hear me okay toward the back of the room? Okay? Thank you. Okay. The number here tonight shows your concern for our school system and what is at stake relative to the instructional services and support services that have traditionally been available to our students and that are now possibly in jeopardy because of the state fiscal crisis. I assume all of you realize that the state has about $10 or $12 billion deficit that they're dealing with, and this is going to have an impact on all public schools in New York State. And we're here to talk about Northeastern Clinton's challenge tonight. Before I get started with the remarks that I'd like to make, I'd just like to introduce the board members that are present tonight. Let's see, over to the far right is Silva Mary Marnes, Vicki Grasser, Linda Gagnon. Our school business administrator, Margot Getman, is here tonight. And Sherry Miller is a representative from the confidential managerial staff, and she does a lot of work in budget development along with Margot Getman. Our budget process begins with a calendar that is presented to the school board for their consideration. Actually start building the budget in the fall of the year for the coming school year, the next school year. And the point I want to make by showing you that is that we have a series of budget meetings starting in December. We had the first one in December of this year, and we have them through January, February, March, April. Around April 21st, the board must adopt a budget because voters consider that budget the third Tuesday in May, and we have to have time to print the budget document and distribute it to the community, time for informational meetings, and do what is called a budget report card. And that has to be mailed home 6 days before the voters consider the budget. That's a new regulation in the last few years. So these meetings are intended to ensure that the school community, the school family, and the community at large have an opportunity to come in and hear the budget deliberations as the board and the administration put together the budget for the next year. And that's my purpose for sharing that with you tonight. By the way, you can get a copy of that calendar on the table right outside the auditorium and a few other materials that are available this evening. So we have the governor's proposal for state aid and the implications for Northeastern Clinton Central School. I want to emphasize right up front that it is a proposal of the governor. It has not been enacted into law. That requires the legislature, the Senate and Assembly to act on a proposal, and they will have a lot to say about the final product, if you will, which then translates into how many state aid dollars the school district here at Northeastern will receive next year to support the instructional and support services for our kids. Northeastern Clinton receives more than half of its revenue in support of the annual budget in state aid. Somewhere between 39 and 41% of the budget is supported through property tax, and the rest of the revenues come from smaller sources. One source that is fairly good size are what are called pilot agreements, where companies relocate to our area, and they get tax breaks, which encourage them to settle in our district. These aren't handled by the district, they're handled by local agencies, but they generate revenue for the district until they come on the tax roll. So that's another source of income to the district. Now, one point I also want to make is that we think this budget crisis will be more than a one-year issue. We think it's going to be 2, 3, or 4 years before things get back to a more normal environment. So when we build our budget, we have to keep that in mind, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit. Another area we're going to touch on tonight will be some significant increases that we're facing in our operating costs. Margaret Getman will speak to you in a few minutes about these. Our major concern, of course, is the impact that the loss of state aid, the large increases that we're looking toward next year, the impact that this would have on our mission, the mission of teaching and learning. And any changes in our program for next year have to take that into serious consideration. We may be looking at larger class sizes, fewer instructional offerings, library services, similar services may have to be curtailed, just to talk about a few of the areas that could be in jeopardy. We may have to be in the difficult position of scaling back programs like our interscholastic athletic program, UN, outdoor education, driver's education, just to name a few. District transportation may have to be looked at, and students perhaps walk a little further to get a bus or to get to school. And this at a time when we have greater concerns because of safety, the many large vehicles on the highways, and in general, our whole world environment in terms of the security of our children and our families. Special education is an area that we're concerned about, and we're going to talk about the rising cost of special education in just a little bit. But right now, I'm going to ask Mrs. Moore, she would put up the brief summary of the education, special education aid issue that as it concerns us. As special education costs increase, the following year, we get a larger amount of revenue back on our previous year's expenses. And what's happening with the governor's proposal for special education aid, we call it excess cost aid. They're freezing that aid with this proposal, which means that we would not get a higher amount of aid back next year. So any new programs and services, as we see it, would have to be borne by the local taxpayer. And of course, this is a big concern to us. Never mind, this year, as expenses accrue, some unanticipated, because the committees on special education work throughout the year properly placing the children in these programs. If there's an additional cost this year, there may be no reimbursement in the ensuing year. So it's a problem for next year, and depending on what they do with the formulas, if there are any in place for next year, as time passes, and that's why I think this is more than a one-year concern. We may be in a position where all of the additional cost might have to be borne locally. It's a cost shifting from the state responsibility to the local. And I really should tell you that it starts with the federal government, who in the early 70s made a commitment to the states and the local school districts that they would cover a lot of the cost for services to special ed students. So that's really never materialized. We do get some federal money, but we never have gotten the percentage that we were told we would get in the 70s. It's Public Law 94-142. Okay. Now, transportation aid. Let's take a look at that one. 2 years ago, we received 90% reimbursement on the purchase of a school bus. That's now at about 78%. Each year, as our expenses increase for the operation of the transportation department, which is run like a separate business within the school system, as our expenses increase, the following year we get a higher amount of aid back to keep the local share at a minimum. Well, the governor's proposal talks about freezing that program. And so any expenses that accrued this year, let's just say it was a 4 or 5% increase over the last year, the aids are frozen. So that's going to shift some of that cost to the local taxpayer and result in higher taxes if in fact the governor's proposal is put in place. One other dimension to it. We have voter approval for 6 new vehicles, 4 standard-sized buses, a bus with wheelchair lifts, and a van. We do some of this every year so we can keep the fleet fairly modern. That means perhaps 10 or 11 years a bus will be on the road, which is a long time. But in any event, if this is enacted into law, the aid would not be there if we were to purchase these vehicles. So we need to find out from the state whether or not there's going to be some aid. Otherwise, it would be all on the local tax rate, and that just won't work. BOCES aid. I expect that most everybody is familiar with BOCES services, Board of Cooperative Educational Services. Champlain Valley Educational Services is our local BOCES. We buy services through BOCES. We share services, might be a better way to put it, where it's not practical for us to offer the program here. We don't have enough students to support the program here, but the student either wants or needs a program that is available through BOCES. So all of the districts in this BOCES have an arrangement where we share services. And what they're saying with regard to BOCES aid is that the aid will be frozen. Actually, it's more than that. It's going to be cut about 25%. The impact on us for next year is about $65,000 approximately. And then if you read through this paragraph here, what they are ultimately saying is by 2005, 2006 that they really would like to phase out BOCES aid. Now, we get services like curriculum development programs, training for teachers, all kinds of services for special education students, occupational education students. There are 25 programs that children can go to. And that's a $440,000 loss in revenue to us if they phase out that program by 2005-06. It's a valuable program for Northeastern Clinton and all the other schools in this North Country. And again, that's a serious concern to us. And then finally, universal pre-K. We get a grant from the state of New York that's apart from our general fund budget. It's not in the general fund budget, $56,316, I think it is, to serve 19 students who are age 4 over at the Champlain Children's Learning Center. And basically they're talking about eliminating that program. They're also talking about eliminating the ladder program, which is a program that's very important to the Assembly in the state of New York, where we get $16,000 in minor maintenance funds. They're eliminating that one under this proposal. And they're eliminating the kindergarten program. Basically what they're saying is if you want the kindergarten program, you must pay for it locally. Now, I want to mention, because people have asked me about this, and we're not clear ourselves at this point. We're not sure whether they're talking about what are referred to as the experimental kindergartens, which were they encouraged schools that did not have kindergartens about 5 or 6 years ago to start them. And we've had kindergartens here for a long time. They gave extra aid, extra money to schools who started kindergartens. Okay? So we're not sure whether they're talking about all the kindergartens in the state being funded locally, or whether they're talking about this new program where they encouraged schools that did not have a kindergarten to establish them, and lots of schools did. There's another dimension to this, the early class size reduction program. We have a teacher that's funded under this program, but our program we don't believe is affected. The program that's referred to here is a state program. Ours is early class size reduction federal, and we don't believe that's affected at all. Okay, so now we're going to put up the summary of the budget. And this is the draft as of today. It's probably almost 2 months away from being finalized, but because we're looking at a loss of aid and we're looking at significantly higher cost for some of our programs, we wanted to have this meeting with the community and get an early start and trying to address how we're going to handle a number of issues if the money is just not there to support all these programs we have. I guess I'd call your attention to probably the area of instruction, the second one down, even though the first one is up about 8%. It's not that large an area of the budget. It goes up about $161,000. But the next area is up almost $1 million, and that's instruction. And that really, there are two factors there. There are ordinary increases for all of the different employee groups that work here at Northeastern Clinton, and that's probably about $400,000 to $450,000 of it. And the next amount is special education, which is over $500,000, and Mark again was going to talk to you a little bit about that in a minute. Pupil transportation is only up about $50,500, which is about a 5% increase. And community services is such a small part of the budget that's up $64. I don't think we want to spend a lot of time on that one. Then the undistributed area is up over $500,000, and there are 3 or 4 reasons for that. And again, Margo's going to talk about that in just a second. Bottom line is the budget today, and it's only a draft, is up about $1.7 million. And if all things have stayed the same, we'd be looking at about a 23.5% increase in taxes for next year, which is a large increase. 2 years ago, we had 9%. The year before last, about 9%. This year, it was 12%. And then we're looking at this for the coming year. And I guess I'll make the point now. I made it sort of toward the end of the meeting this afternoon. As your budget goes up this way, an 8% increase in the budget, okay, you might stand that for 1 year. But then you've got that larger sum to work with the second year, and if you don't have the revenue to support it, you've got a big problem. So we need to always be cognizant of the year down the road and keep that budget in balance so that it doesn't create a big problem the following year. In other words, if you don't have the revenue to support a program, then you've got to scale back your program a little bit. Now, Margo, let's give you time to say a few words about these areas that are quite increasing.
Good evening. Putting the slide up here. As we prepare the 03-04 budget, we're looking at some unusually high increases in the following areas. and that would include employee retirement, health insurance, special education, transportation aid, and of course salary increases. With regard to employment retirement, costs are expected to increase from about $94,000 to $256,000. That's a 172% increase, or about $162,000 just for employee retirement. Health insurance, we're looking at a 14% increase in health insurance costs for the district, or an increase of approximately $342,000 year over year. Special education is about a $3.6 million budget, or over 17% of the total budget. And we're looking at an increase of over $580,000 as we go into 03-04. Now, some of this is tuition, about $158,000. Some of it is related services, about $245,000. There are also a number of new high-cost students for which the district is responsible. One of the problems with special ed, as with these other areas that I've discussed, is that the district has very little control over them, and yet obviously they have to be incorporated into the budget. State aid is clearly becoming more restrictive as to what and how much is going to be aidable and at what rate. Transportation aid, as Chris mentioned, transportation aid is expected to be flat year over year. However, we're looking at higher costs in the form of insurance, higher debt service, higher gas and diesel prices, and the possibility of new mandates. And finally, we have to anticipate salary increases, which are reflected in the ordinary cost of doing business. So all of these things have to be incorporated into the budget.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay. Some of the areas that we're looking at. Okay. Not in any particular order, except that we put the larger potential savings sort of from the top to bottom. We may be able to cut back on the number of elementary staff across the district. We have 3 elementary schools. The potential is for savings of about $225,000. What that means, though, is larger class sizes, maxing out the class sizes, and it has the potential for meaning a few students might have to be transferred between and among buildings so as not to exceed the class size goals that we have. I mentioned earlier interscholastic athletics. The total cost of the program there is about $153,000. Library and media, if we were to cut the whole program, it would be $145,000. Maybe we could cut a little part of that program to get to goal. Half-day kindergarten. If we did go to half-day kindergarten, we would be able to perhaps save 2 positions, about $100,000. We have elementary music, art, and PE. If the classroom teachers did the music, art, and PE, and we had perhaps a specialist in each of those areas in the district to help the classroom teachers, we probably could save $100,000. Non-mandated language. What is meant by that is the non-mandated foreign language. That'd be French and Spanish at the 4th year and the 5th year, and maybe some middle school foreign language would not be available. Summer school. That's about a $50,000 program. Driver's education. It's a 1-semester program in summer school. That's $17,000. After school instruction. It's extra help for the students. At the end of the day, $15,000. We have a grant, and we provide the services through Champlain Valley Family Services, and we supplement that grant with 1 day of extra service, and that's $12,508. After school detention costs about $12,000 a year. Outdoor education, $10,008. Field trips and band, $10,000. UN, $5,775. Cutting back on the amount of equipment we have in the budget, and I can tell you we have not that much in the budget for equipment at all. You could cut back maybe $5,000 to buy student chairs, desks, cafeteria tables, wear out, and have some equipment. We could probably cut back a little in supplies, but we have a basic budget for supplies. And the others are small items on that side. A suggestion has been made to look at the possibility of closing the Champlain Elementary School, relocating the children to the Moores and the Rouse's Point elementary schools. If that were to be done in total, and you didn't need to, transfer the teachers or the positions to the other schools, it could be over a $700,000 savings there. But that requires, additional study and so on. There are a couple of things we're also looking at, like a sixth period of instruction, the middle high school, but I put a little asterisk on that because that requires negotiations with the bargaining unit on that item. The impact of that change would have to be negotiated, along with other things that are probably quite unusual in the North Country, but we noticed the Rochester schools are looking at a shortened school day and/or a longer four-day school week. There are some problems with all of those proposals, but we're going to take a look at them just to see what the possibilities are. I mentioned transportation a few minutes ago, and we're even looking at photocopy leases and so on. So those are some of the things that we're going to study over the course of the next few weeks as we work on the school budget and try to get to a point where we can put a proposal together that it's possible to ask the taxpayers to accept, and all of you, many of you had children in school. Okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about tax implications, I think, next. Just very briefly for this slide here, there are some new regulations from back to 1997, I believe it is, that talk about a situation where a budget is defeated. You can go back to the voters one more time, or you could go to what's called a contingent budget. And the point I'd like to make for this slide is that if we went to a contingent budget, we could not pass a budget. The budget could only go up 1.92%. And if that were the case, just a moment, okay, if the budget could only go up 1.92%, we'd have to cut $1,299,742 out of our budget. The budget could only go up $423,437. And another point, the governor is proposing that if the budget increases over, this is ordinary school budget, it increases over the cost of living, I'm going to use the 1.92, okay? If it goes up over that, you have to have a 2/3 vote of the taxpayers who come and vote on that budget for that budget to be approved. And that's a big change before enacted. It's not in place today. So that would put a tremendous cap on our capacity to continue to offer a sound education for the children. So we move on to the next sheet. Just want to one tax sheet, so if you have that. Into that? Okay. All right. I'll just pass that along. The bottom line is that if we don't get more aid, if we were to continue the program that we have now, basically, we'd be looking at about a 23.5% increase in taxes. I'm going to just make a few more remarks, and I'm going to stop. and then we would like to hear from you as to any questions you have and suggestions you have. So I just wanted to mention to you that what you can do to help is you can get a hold of the document that's out on the table. You can write your senator, your assembly person, the state leadership in Albany. And you can encourage them to take a look at where they're going to spend money next year. If you open the paper, every day you're going to see that they have a grant for this program, a grant for that program. I might ask them to consider changing their priorities a bit to help the schools. And that would be the greatest service that you could render in support of the public schools in the state of New York, including Northeastern Clinton. I'm not sure if I've missed any particular points that I should add, but I think at this point I'll stop and ask you for your comments and suggestions. We're going to take note of them, and we'll look into them in the weeks ahead. And we encourage you to come to the budget sessions. The next one is March 3rd in the middle high school library. We encourage you to come and listen to the discussions that take place and follow the decision making. And there's an opportunity for you to make comment there. So, thank you for your attention, and I'll try to answer your questions as best I can. Okay, there's a gentleman in the back. I'll go to him first, and then you, Bob, okay? There's a mic over here, and I would ask you to speak up because everybody would like to hear what it's going to say.
Oh, first of all, my name's
Bob?
Bob O'Neill.
Bob? Okay, go right ahead, Bob. There's a gentleman at the mic. Go ahead first. He's going to wait. Thank you, Bob.
First of all, I'm not from Champlain, but I'm from Ross's Point, and I spoke the last time in February about closing the Champlain School. I think it's the wrong issue to go on. Okay, that's one point, and that's for other Champlainers to speak up. The second item I'd like to talk about is your retirement. The way I read it in the paper is that the State Retirement Bureau invested in the stock market. They lost money. Now they want to turn around for us taxpayers to make up for their loss, which we all lost money. There's not everybody in the stock market. I don't think that's right that the state of New York to make us make up for your retirement for losses to the stock market, which is sometimes around 40%. Why is it
40%?
around 40% loss?
Yes, that's the employees' retirement system.
That's right.
That's the system that provides retirement for the non-instructional workers in the district. They have, it said in the article that I read, they have $133 billion in assets. In this past year, the system lost about $33 billion of it in the market.
Now show me the law that the taxpayers have to make up for that loss.
Well, it's a good point, but you need to direct that comment.
No, I'm asking you because you're the superintendent.
Yes.
To speak to or write a letter to the retirement bureau and ask us what law says that we have to make up for your losses.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
The teachers' retirement system, the rate hasn't changed. They're apparently large enough that they were able to absorb the fluctuations in the market. That's a larger system than the other one. There are two different systems that apply to this school district. So that one hasn't, so far, gone up at all. It's one of the lowest rates we've had in years in that system, less than 1%.
I was going up 173%.
That's the employee's retirement. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll write a letter and try to get some.
And what law says we have to make up, us taxpayers, for the retirement? Show me what law it is in the state of New York. Because I don't think it ever happened before, but we do have it now.
When I first started in school about 30 years ago, the rate was somewhere around 22% in the teacher's retirement on salary, and now it's less than 1%. So they've done a lot of work with that system, In the other system, the employee return system, the rate was very low for a long time, but this past year was a difficult year. But your point is well taken.
In the second, I would like to see comparable figures. You know, Chris, you give us the sheet here with figures of millions of dollars, but I would like to see by accounts what you have in the present budget now and what you propose in this present coming budget, so we can compare apples to apples.
Sure. We can provide you with the current year budget like that.
Yes.
From last year to this year. We
Yes.
can provide that to you. We had that question this afternoon. And we do have a few of those budgets in the office. If you'll just call Sheila Miller in the morning, we'll make one available to you. And if anybody else is interested in one,
Well, I think we all should have one. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody here is interested in that.
It's a very thick document. You'll have that as we present the proposal to the school board for next year. You'll absolutely have that. And you'll also have available to you what we call a popular budget, which is a simplified version or a kind of a summarized version of that. But everybody will be welcome to have one of those. And we make those available whenever anybody comes to an informational meeting. We have one at Moore's every year. We have one right in this room every year. And this is a fairly thick book that has all of the different codes in it, and it compares year to year. And that's a very good thing for the voter to take a look at, so they can compare, apples to apples, as it were.
So
Happy to do it.
my last thing for now
Yes, sir.
is, this is not new. As I said in February, this is just a repeat of the 1970s, only it's worse in money-wise. But we went for early 1970s, when my children was in school, for 5 years. And out of the 5 years, we had 3 years of austerity budget. And that means we had to go out as the Booster Club and raise money for all the health, art, interscholastic sports, and everything like that. So I know what we've gone through. And another thing is, when you have a budget, you always turn down the budget for, or cut out the transportation for anybody living with 2 miles within the school has to walk. I don't want ever to hear that phrase again, or in the budget that they had to go have a special budget to add the monies back into the school budget. That should be, the transportation for these kids should be all included in the budget. Let's not argue about transportation for these kids. That's all I have for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. I just make a comment that the transportation budget for years and years and years has remained about 6% of the total budget. So that budget has remained very stable over the years and hasn't had many fluctuations. There's a gentleman behind you that would like to address the group.
Mr. DeGrand Craig, members of the school board, and members of this assembly. My name is Joseph Stawodzki, and I'm a member of the NCCS AIDS Advisory Council and have several questions regarding the current NCCS AIDS education program, exposing the proposed NCCS school budget to possible extremely expensive legal liabilities. I was shocked to learn that 8th grade students in a home and career skills class were taught how to have all kinds of sex with every kind of birth control method imaginable. According to the Home and Careers Skills course material, it appears that what is being taught at NCCS for AIDS prevention is diametrically opposed to both New York State mandates and guidelines and the NCCS AIDS education philosophy, which both require teaching of abstinence for AIDS prevention and honoring community values as expressed by approximately 225 members of this community who signed this petition entitled AIDS Prevention by Abstinence for All NCCS Students. So my first question is, does the NCCS school district have sufficient liability insurance and reserve funds to carry this district through extremely high-cost legal proceedings by parents of students who get AIDS, STDs, or become pregnant because of the course content teaching lifestyles conducive to getting AIDS, STDs, or becoming pregnant? So, Mr. Grandpré, members of the school board, I'm waiting for an answer.
We have adequate liability insurance for school purposes.
Members of the school board wish to comment? If not, second question is this. Since the NCCS AIDS philosophy, approved by the school board, calls for abstinence for AIDS prevention consistent with community values, and this petition called for abstinence for all NCCS students, and if a teacher deviates from the philosophy and the community values, does the district have negligence coverage? And if not, will the administration and school board who tolerate this legally dangerous course content provide funds from their own resources to cover damages?
Mr. Zawadzki, if any parent has a problem with any of our curriculum, they should see the school principal and have that issue addressed. Okay? This is a budget forum tonight, not a political forum for any other reason. I will comment to the people here that our curriculum relative to AIDS has been reviewed by the committee some time ago. I think it goes back to 1989.
Correct.
Correct? And our curriculum is in accord with the New York State curriculum for AIDS instruction.
That's what I thought.
Tonight, sir, we're talking about the budget.
That's what I'm talking about. And I don't think it's being realized. There is a legal problem here. The NCCS school district did, at that time, to the Community's Delight, institute an abstinence for AIDS curriculum. But then I'm hearing stories recently where this anything goes is taught. The community values are not being taught, and there's a legal liability that can really...
It's a legal liability of the parents to teach whether sex should be done in school or not. It's not the responsibility.
Wait, this issue was settled in 1988, 89.
If it was settled, stop talking about it then.
Why don't you move on to your next question, sir?
And then my last comment is this: or will we, the taxpayers, be left to bear the financial burden from such litigation? I see an opportunity for litigation here based on some of what I heard, what was taught in this to 8th graders.
The only thing I can tell you, sir, is if you have a concern, come over to the school, sit down with school administration, and pose your concern to the school administrator. They'll provide you with a copy of the curriculum. They'll provide you with the answers that you seek. We are here to offer a good and wholesome program for all of our students. We're very careful about that. That's our mission. Make sure we raise kids in a manner that they're going to become wonderful citizens, fine parents, good and wholesome people. That's what we want for them.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you for coming this evening. Yes, sir.
My name is Scott.
Go ahead.
My name is Scott Short. I'm a village board trustee for Champlain. I have a letter from the mayor going to address the board, address to you,
Okay.
read it to your board and to the public,
Is there something that you'd like to read to them? Your letter?
address to you so you can read it.
Okay.
And to the board and to the public.
I'd be happy to. And your name again, sir?
It is trustee Scott Short.
And you're a trustee from the Village of Champlain. Thank you for coming tonight. All right. It's a letter addressed to me, the superintendent. On behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Champlain, I'm writing to express our concern regarding the possible closing of the Champlain Elementary School. Our community was devastated by the loss of a major employer several years ago. We feel the closure of the school will do further harm. We are a small rural community that can offer its residents and children a fine education close to home with friends and neighbors. This elementary school is centrally located and is the one that makes sense to keep. There is plenty of room for expansion if needed for a centrally located elementary school. The district would have a great deal of difficulty selling this property, while at least one of the other sites is readily saleable. We realize that you're experiencing a very difficult situation with your budget, and cuts must be made that not everyone will be pleased with. If we can be of assistance, please feel free to contact us. Very truly yours, Albert Laporte, Mayor. And I'll turn this over to the clerk of the board in the morning, and the whole school board will get a copy of this at their next meeting. Thank you for bringing that tonight. Okay.
I have a couple other questions. Brought up myself.
Yes, sir.
I saw your draft and I'm familiar with budgets myself, working with the village board, doing budgets for the village. I didn't see any cut in administration.
Well, there could be a cut if the Champlain Elementary School goes. There could be a cut there.
I'm looking at the, counselors, guidance counselors, we have 5 of them, 2,400 students. Why couldn't you cut back to 3?
Well, every area,
we're talking every area. Those guidance counselors get paid in, we know, big dollars. And we're talking savings. In administration, when you're talking a little school like Champlain, when you cut a few administrative positions, you could probably save that school.
thank you for the suggestion. Yes.
My name is Laura Whelan. I live in Rouse's Point. I have 2 children in the school district. I think, first of all, one of the biggest concerns that I have is the fact that you're willing to make cuts in the special education program. Every student, regardless of whether they're regular education or special education students, whether they're gifted and talented or they have learning disabilities, have a right, regardless of whether the state or federal government is willing to make those payments for the aid, to have an equal education. And if that means that this board needs to be a little more creative in how they make their funds available to that program, then that's what you need to do. Maybe they need to prioritize what is it that it takes to get a kid into college successfully these days. Math, science, and English. Things like chorus and band and things like that are not a priority. And if it's that serious and you need to cut that much money, then maybe those are areas that you need to look at. They're talking about 23.5% increase in taxes. Okay? I don't know how many people here are willing to put that kind of money up. Our education is important. We've already had a tax increase here. And these are the kids that are suffering because we're not giving them what they deserve. And because the governor has made a poor choice in what he wants to pass down to the schools, doesn't mean that you need to make the same poor choices. Non-mandated language, cuts and certain things like that are possibilities. Summer school, I don't believe, is something that you should cut. There are students who have difficulties and issues, and if there are situations where those students need to go to summer school just to be able to graduate that year, that's not something that you should be cutting from a student. This is a time right now when businesses all over the North Country are struggling. Businesses are closing, people are getting laid off. And you want to talk about salary increases. All right, everybody deserves a salary increase. And even some of your largest businesses in this area, like Wyeth, where a lot of these taxpayers work, had a very large number of employees who received no raise, no bonus, or no promotion this year because business suffered. I didn't hear anything about a possibility that 1 year you went without a salary increase. And I just think it's unreasonable that we're asked to, pay Mercedes-Benz prices in the form of taxes for compact car quality education. And I think it's unconscionable that you're going to consider, making cuts in special education for the students, and those are the students who need it the most. The ones that need help and deserve to be able to get a quality education. It's unconscionable. And you really need to think long and hard about how you can utilize your funds without making these kids suffer. That's right.
Thank you very much. Ms. Marge?
I wasn't aware that we were cutting special education. Isn't it the governor's budget for studying special
Yeah.
education?
The school district is not doing so. It is the governor's proposal we're talking about. And the governor's proposal,
So that's less money that you're gonna get,
Correct.
and you're not gonna change anything.
So you shift money out of one program, put it into that one to cover it.
well, that is always
Cut
a
your band, cut your art. You don't need that. You don't need that to get to college.
We're talking about a $500,000 increase in our special aid budget. If I read the figures correctly, we're talking about a $500,000 increase this year from last year. We certainly don't have $500,000.
Did you get a raise this year?
They need to find
Did you
out.
guys get raises this year?
these folks are all
You guys
volunteers.
don't. Did you get a raise this year?
Did I get a raise? Yes.
What?
This past year?
I think the point is there's
But,
$500,000.
but that's not, we're not here to argue about that tonight. We're not here to argue about some of these things. We're here to educate, we're here to inform, so that you can be informed when the time comes and you can contribute when we have our budget meetings. You can come and you can express your point of view like you're doing tonight, which we appreciate very, very much.
No, what we're pointing out is that we have no intention of cutting special education. We do what is mandated by law. What we're pointing out is that the governor's budget is cutting what the state is going to contribute to that amount, which means it goes back to the local taxpayers, so the local taxpayers have to come up with more money.
I think the
That's
point
all
I
we're
was
pointing
trying to
out.
make is, why do local taxpayers have to come up with extra money? When you can creatively adjust things and move that money from one budget to another.
We don't have that much of money to play with.
But you're gonna have some.
What,
So
well,
those kids in special education get the bare minimum again.
they don't.
They have to follow a mandate. If they have an EAC or they have to follow that mandate, they're going to get the services they're going to need. They're not going to cut their services out completely. They can't. My child gets special ed services. I can tell
I'm
you
well
right now,
aware
she's
of how the
not.
procedure works.
Right.
The point we're trying to make is, you need $500,000 more for special education, and you're asking every one of these taxpayers to foot that bill. When you're talking about cutting this and this in other areas, fine. Take some of that money that you want to do without sports next year. Is that a necessary thing for kids to get a good education in college? Not necessarily. You're talking about art, you're talking about PE, okay, cutting those things at elementary levels, cut it across the board, reduce it across the board, and take the money that you would have dedicated to those things and move it over to cover those additional costs for special education and those other things.
Thank you for your comment. We do have another individual at the mic that would like to make some comments.
Yes, my name is Eugenia Zalowski, and I'm from Rouse's Point. I don't mean this question to be redundant, but I really would like a concrete figure or number. I think it's germane to what the previous speaker brought up, namely the lady, I'm sorry I didn't get your name, who made a presentation, spoke of the various areas in the budget which will be increased, and she gave concrete figures in both in percentage terms and in concrete dollars. However, when it came to the salary increases, she skirted that issue by not giving any percentages or numbers. She simply stated that it was an ordinary cost of doing business. My question is, can you give a concrete figure, both in terms of either percentages or dollars, as to the increase, the salary increases that this new budget will include?
Okay. Well, we have 4 employee groups making the question. There's 4 employee groups. This year, we negotiated with the Civil Service Employees Association, and I believe this year's increase is a 4%, and next year a 5%. It's a long-term agreement. Now, in those agreements, we got a number of things that the district was looking for. An increase in the percentage of help toward the premium contribution, health insurance. We've got more productivity, longer work day, and so forth. So there are a number of things that we've got that we needed in that agreement. And so that's one agreement. The Secretary's agreement is similar. They're going from I think it's a 32.5-hour week to a 39-hour week. And they got a 5% increase as an adjustment for that. They're giving a higher amount for their premium contribution too. 2 big items that we needed very much. Let's see, CSA, the administrative group has a long-term contract. It's in the 3rd or 4th year, and the increase is 4%. That was settled maybe 3 years ago. The Teachers Association, the largest employee group in the district, we're currently in negotiations with that group. So there is that has not been settled yet, and we've been negotiating for a number of months with the Teachers Association. I think that's about as specific as I could be in answer to your question, Mrs. Zawadzki.
Yes. Well, thank you for that information. My only response is that I think that these percentages are above the inflation rate. In addition, I also think that YFA's raises, I think that's a good parameter to use as a comparison. I don't think there's raises of 5%. I may be wrong. Someone perhaps can corroborate what I said.
They're under 5%. This year, all company employees gave up their raises.
We got no raise. The average is under 3%.
And we work 40 hours plus if we're 32 hours. What's that?
Right.
So do we. So do we.
We take our work over 40 hours a week.
So 32-hour working.
Keep in mind that is one of the largest employers in the area whose parents are your taxpayers. And that 23.5% you want to increase coming out of the less than 3% salary increase that if anybody got a salary increase think about how it's going to be for them to start to look at that.
Exactly.
You guys have 4 to 5.
Exactly the reason for this meeting. We have increased costs. You need to know about it. We're going to get our budget down to a reasonable number because we want to attract families into the district. We want to have an excellent educational program to encourage them to live in the Northeastern Clinton Central School District. We recognize we have to have a reasonable tax rate because the first thing they ask when they contact the district is, how are we done on the 4th, 8th grade and Regents assessments? Okay, they want to know about that, and they've looked it up on the internet. They ask that, and the next thing they want to know is what's the school tax rate? And, we have a high tax rate. We know that. So, and of course, to entice a business into town, you've got to give them tax breaks, you've got to have good schools, and you also have to have a reasonable tax rate so that they can settle here and still make a profit. We have another question.
I'm out of retail, I'm a junior here, and I just like to make a comment about, I think that the lady in the blue shirt down here said that we're paying Mercedes prices for compact education, and the education will always be compact if you cut the French courses and the Spanish courses. I think that I've gotten a very good education here because I have challenged myself with the elective courses. I take chemistry is not required. I take calculus, that's not required. And I just think that they're always going to be compact educations if you don't have the electives and stuff. And I think that I think that we should be considering cutting sports before these other classes. I know that you might have to do a little bit of both, but I'm just saying that sports is secondary to education, and I think everybody in this room would agree that education is their first priority. And I would like to get to UN. Next week, you'll see 600 kids in this room and 19 gifted kids up on the stage. And that's what they're here for, is modeling event. And the 600 kids are from 20 different schools from around the area. And it's not just affecting this school. You got to think that it's affecting all those other schools. They come here to learn. I read in Time magazine in the fall that I think 25% of people from the age 18 to 25 couldn't put Iraq on a map. And we're about to go to war with Iraq, and we have gone to war with Iraq in the past. And I think that that's very sad, but by cutting UN, you don't give these kids that whole extra, global, politics, and they learn politics and all this other stuff, and you can win awards and stuff and represent different countries. It's a lot of fun, and I don't think that show would really be considered to be cut. And I'd like to bring up, we have a great advisor, and all this stuff is put together by 19 kids, and sometimes it's less, sometimes it might be more, but 19 of us put on this mock UN, and it's great. And you guys want to stop by and check it out. It's great, seriously. And I can't even think that we should even be considered to cut this one. It's such a great program. It doesn't really get a lot of money from the budget. It's, I think, $5,775 on the sheet that was up on the overhead projector. And I think that I just think that it's a great program and shouldn't be considered to be cut when all 600 kids from 20 different schools get at least so much out of it. You're going to take something away even if you just sit there for 3 days. And I think that it says something if every kid at a conference goes away with knowing something about local politics or something else. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm James Tierney, along with Adam. I am a junior here at the school, and the lady that spoke a few times ago said that to get into college you need your basic math, science. These days you need more than that to get into a good college. I myself and my two junior colleagues over here, we don't expect to go to community college. I want to go to an out-of-state university, and to get into that I'm going to need my sports, I'm going to need my extracurricular, my band, my AP courses. I mean, right now in Northeastern, we have the lowest AP courses in the area. If I were to say transfer to Beavertown, I would probably have 5 to 10 more opportunities for me. I have friends with those schools that are taking college biology, microbiology, AP physics, all this stuff. I am taking calculus, and the only college course we have is 2 years of college calculus, 1 year of English. That's it. That's all we have. When I want to go to a different college, if I want to go to a nice college out of state, and I want to compete with these other students for scholarships, they're going to look at my application and they're going to say, wow, he has 2 AP courses, this guy has 10. And then with these people trying to cut our courses, they're cutting our legs short and what we can do. I don't know how we're going to be able to do it, but I think there's no way we can consider cutting any of these higher education, because that's just going to screw us in the long run. That's what I have to say.
last year and it'll come up again this year. One thing I talked to Mr. Granbury about was liability insurance. Just like we do with our car insurance and our house insurance, we have to reassess and look at for better rates. He was telling me that they're in the process of doing that, which I think is a good thing and probably overdue. Some other things that have come up. One thing I think is very important is kindergarten. You're talking about possibly cutting it to half a day. I mean, I kind of get a kick out of this. The state is jumping on making kids' education the most important thing, and here they want to cut the funds where they're going to take kindergarten out. I mean, that's the very first step you have to take in school, and they want to take it away. You know, it doesn't make sense. I mean, of all things, if you're going to cut anything, that's not one. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. It's like shooting yourself in the foot before you get in the woods to go deer hunting, you know. Busing, there was a gentleman talking about busing. Generalized getting kids to school, I don't see where you should cut the busing there, but there's a lot of other areas where busing can be cut. You have sports. I went to Shazy when I was a kid. You get transported to a game from the school, back to the school. From the school is your responsibility to get a ride to and from. Most parents go to sports or band events or other events, so most kids have a ride home anyway. And you're talking just probably a very small handful of kids that need a ride. I'm sure in times of need, people can work things out. Let's see, what else we got here? Busing, kindergarten, insurance. And the same thing as I said last year. Everyday operations. When you want to assess things, when you really got to cut things, you can look at everything and find ways to cut. You know, you assess things for efficiency, and you assess them for what they cost. You know, you can sometimes do the same job a different way for a lot less money. When you have to cut, you find ways. You become innovative. And it needs to be done. I think now, more than last year, it needs to be done this year. And probably in the future. It's hard. Cutting is always hard. Nobody wants to take the money out of their hands or the wallet or whatever, unless it's for fun. But when you have to do it, you do it. Let's see. I guess the last thing I want to talk about is state mandates is probably one of the biggest things that hurt us. And I think everybody should take a part, write to the government, whoever they want to write to, just to make them aware. If you're going to mandate something for a school district to do, then you should help. Somebody was telling me they mandated defibrillators, and they said something was like in excess of $70,000.
You know, I should comment on that because you raised the issue of the AEDs, the defibrillators. The state, after as a part of the budget this past year, mandated that the schools install defibrillators in all their buildings. So we've ordered 8, and we have 6 more on order. They're about 2,000 apiece. And then there's some little devices that have to go with them, so those are extra costs. You have to have cabinets for them and so on. That was a mandate, no provisions made for that, and no aid to follow, no money for that. That was just a new thing that we had to do. 2 other quick ones. School buses. You notice all the reflective tape on the school buses these days? I don't know if you've noticed it, but it costs about $700 to put that reflective tape on a school bus. That's a mandate, really no aid or anything like that. The stop arms that come out in the front of the new buses, $350, $400 a piece. Originally, as a mandate, of course, we had to put those on, and now the new buses have one not only in the front but in the rear. So these are some little things that are passed along to the school districts for which there may not be much aid coming or no aid coming. Might get a little bit on the bus reflective tape and on the stop arms. But there are a lot of things like that that come through the school district, and we talk about the AEDs, a very worthy thing to do. But there is no funding coming from Albany to pay for those new items. So it's not 70,000. I don't know where that came from, but I would say 30 to 32,000, sir.
Okay. And one thing I forgot to mention about, when you're assessing everyday operations and stuff, one thing that I seem to notice being involved in the last couple of years, we're not, as taxpayers and everyday people, we're not here. Most of us aren't here every day. So we don't actually see what happens, what goes on. So we only get hearsay stuff. And from that, we see things that if we had to do it, we'd do it a lot different. And there's a lot of things that I'm sure that could be changed for better. And we don't see what needs to be changed because most of us aren't here. But I'm sure there's a lot of things that could be looked at and really changed for the better and probably more efficient. And I think that's it. But I think one thing is we should rate the state government on these mandates because some of them are pretty excessive. And if you're going to mandate somebody to do something, then you should at least put some money up for it. That's it.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Dan Lincoln. I'm a parent. I've got a couple comments. First off, I'm wondering if the board has considered trying to contract out some services, for instance, bus services. Why the district has to have its own set of buses and run them continuously, I really don't know. When I went to school, those were contracted out for specific reasons that the school district could not afford liability themselves. The contractor could get cheaper insurance and maintain the buses and everything else without our bus the school district can deal with. I don't know if that option is available here, but something that should be considered. Textbooks. I look at my daughter's textbooks, and there's very few names above hers in terms of years of use. When I went to grade school, and I had a textbook that was due within 6 or 7 years, that was really amazing. I don't know if you guys can do textbooks every 2 or 3 years. Some subjects like history, math, doesn't change that rapidly. You get new textbooks every 2 or 3 years just because we need to be that up to date. Things, again, don't change that rapidly. Stuff like driver's ed. That's a nice benefit, but does the school district really have to do that? I would think there might be other services available in the community that could pick that up. My opinion is that the student is appropriately knowledgeable enough to be behind the wheel. They're probably a student that is capable of having a job and maybe working on their own to afford some public driver's ed, of course, rather than the school district. The lady in the blue turtleneck made a number of good points with the special ed that some of the other people here with Champlain Elementary open. Kind of 2 points there, but the main thing is when kids develop their ability to learn how to deal with the pressures of school, to interact with others, to do homework and all that stuff, that's all learned in the very early ages of education. We got a great pre-K system, going into kindergarten for a full day, going through elementary school. I think it's great that we have 3 elementary schools in this district, and I would argue strongly that those are the years where we need to have our best teachers and our best efforts put forth to allow these kids to get the head start they need. Because once they get to middle school, they're basically on their own. Parents are pretty much obstructions to the life by then. So if the children don't have their own heads on their shoulders looking forward, they're not going to get it if they haven't gotten it in those early preschool through grade school education periods. And another just general question, if you look at simple things like turning down the heat in the building. My My kid specifically does not wear sweaters or sweatshirts to school because it's always way too hot in the classrooms. I don't know if other parents have had that same experience with their children. Again, I don't know if there was that SET Act. But again, there's simple savings like that that would save quite a bit of money over the course of the year. I think the last thing we need to talk about is, again, is special ed. This is something that I really need to fight for, regardless of what the state does, to make sure we have money for that. It may seem like it's an awful lot for us to spend extra resources on giving these kids the education they need to get a high school diploma. But if kids with special ed needs, say, the hell of school and drop out at 15, 16 years, my tax dollar is paying to support that kid for the next 60 or 70 years through social services and whatever other services they're going to be drawing from the community. I would much rather spend a little money now to help all these kids get at least a high school education so they can actually contribute something to the rest of society down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to this gentleman here and then to Jane over there.
I just want to talk about the health insurance increase. I understand the teachers pay part of their health insurance now. They're talking about a 14% increase, okay? I know it's a lot of money for everybody, but the bottom line is where I work, my insurance went up from about $125 to $150 a month. In 1 year, it went up to over $300 a month. If I wanted to have the insurance, that's what I had to pay. Okay, if it's going to go up 14%, I'm not saying the teachers and the employees and everybody has to take the brunt of that increase, but I think some of it should be shared. Okay, shared by me, and I don't begrudge anybody a raise. Okay, a 4 or 5% raise in today's society is a decent raise. And I'm not anti-teacher. I think they do a fantastic job, and I love the school district. Okay, but I haven't gotten a 4 or 5% raise. Well, okay, never. Okay, is what I'm looking at. I was in the military. We had people giving their lives out, getting a 1.5% raise a year. In some years, not getting any. Okay, so a little increase in insurance, I think, could go a long way and help us out too. And just a small one, it's only $12,000 for after-school detention. Cut it, period. No reason for it. I went to Northeastern Clinton School, and the man whose auditorium was named after Bud Moore, 2 trips to his office, and you didn't want to be anywhere near him. Okay, so that's all I'm saying. Change whatever policy you do. $12,000 is a waste. Get rid of it. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Jane Corner DeCoste. I live up in Cannon Corners. And what I'm going to say is unpopular, but I think that the board is doing a good job. I've come to a lot of these meetings. I don't think there is a lot of excess left in the budget. I think they're working very hard, and they're going to have to make very difficult decisions. I personally believe, and I've talked to a number of people, that you got to look at how many buildings are we supporting. While we're saying it's good for the kids, overhead isn't good for the kids. The money that's going into heat separate buildings isn't going into education. We have teachers who are driving from building to building. We're paying them to drive from building to building. If they spend 20 minutes between the buildings, it's 20 minutes they're not spending with our children, and that doesn't make educational sense. It's painful to close community schools, but other districts in the area have done it, and they've gotten over it. I think there's a lot of duplication. Someone said administratively that has to be done when there are separate buildings. If you close those buildings, we can save money in those areas. It can go into education, can go into our kids. If you're not heating this building, the heat money can go into the kids. It's not going to be popular. People aren't going to like it, but I think it has to be done. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
There's just one thing I'd like to add to what Jane was saying. If you're looking at closing Champlain, I would like a detailed estimate of what your savings are going to be. I mean, what you're going to save by just closing the building, not counting salaries of people there, not counting maintenance. You need to look at all the numbers. You know, you're saying $750,000.
gonna save, and you're saying that's probably a high number or maybe a conservative number. But in the same token, that's just a number. And it doesn't really reflect anything other than a number. I mean, you need to know what you're gonna save on heating. That you can tell because you do it every year. You need to know what you're gonna save on maintenance. You still have to have some kind of maintenance, some kind of heating. But you can get these numbers, and you can get a pretty close detail of what you're gonna save. And staff members you're gonna save, and the whole thing. It has to be detailed so we can understand what's happening. I don't think anybody wants to make a decision on closing the school if the savings is not going to be there. I mean, if you're going to just move people around and you're not going to save that much, then I don't think you really want to go to school. But in the same token, if there's a substantial savings, that's an issue you got to look at. And I think it's warranted, but you need to know the numbers so we can understand them. You know, I mean, it's easy to put a number on a paper, but there ain't nothing to go with it to tell you what it is. It means nothing. And I see a lot of that sometimes with some of these drafts and what we see in the paper. It's numbers, and it's not always the same numbers, or it's not talking about the same thing. So, I mean, you need to compare apples to apples all the time, so we understand, so you understand, so we're all talking on the same level. I mean, otherwise, you're just blowing air, and it don't mean nothing. And everybody's confused, and this is where you get all your controversy. Nobody understands what's happening, and you get all these people feuding because of what's being said, and it's not really true. Sometimes, or most of the time.
I have to agree with you, and I think it's important that you come to the board meetings monthly, you come to the budget meetings monthly, where we talk about all of this in great detail. This is a general forum tonight to let people know we have a budget crisis, and we're dealing with it. We want you to know about it. We're getting lots of good suggestions tonight, and input. We want to know how you feel about it. After all, it's your school.
And I think that's why we're here. We're trying to let you know what we need so we can understand what the numbers you're telling us. Because I know today I got last year's budget book in the little pocket book. Because I want to see what last year was. I want to see what the numbers were for last year. Detail. I mean, you can generalize numbers, and it doesn't mean nothing. Because you can change those, and we still don't know what you're talking about.
We can provide that to you, sir.
Yeah. Okay?
Yep, not a problem. Thank you very much for your comments. Now, there's a gentleman right back here that had a chance to...
All right, my name's Leon Dutel. I'd like to know what was the salary paid to our Northeastern Clinton employees last year, the total?
Total salaries for last year for all employees, all classes of employees. Kelly, you got anything there that might be able to provide to us?
2001, 2002?
Yeah, last year, whatever it was.
You talking about this current year, sir, or last year?
Last year, whatever the one you're working budget again.
Okay.
The last,
Well, actually, our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th, so the current year is 202, 203. I'm thinking it's $10 million, but...
All right, let's use $10 million.
Between $10 and $11 million, sir.
Let's use $10 million as a figure.
Yeah.
Your lowest employee raise was 4%. $10 million, that's $400,000. If you were to take and give them a 2% raise, you'd have $200,000 that you save cutting nothing.
Correct.
All right?
Yeah.
That's just a number I'm throwing out.
Yeah. Let me comment on that, though, because keep in mind, I think I mentioned earlier, there are 4 employee groups in the district, okay? And
I realize the teachers haven't been signed yet. The teacher's contract has not been signed yet.
Correct, we're in the process.
Okay, I use the 4% figure because that's what you gave me, what you want of all your employees here.
Yeah. My point is, I don't. If you have more questions, ask. Great. I just want to mention to everybody that when you have an employee agreement, that's a contract between the employee group, the bargaining unit, and the school district. Okay? You would negotiate all the terms and conditions of employment, and once you've agreed to that, the district must honor that. Okay? You could go back to the group, and we have, every time we've had a fiscal crisis, we've gone to the groups and asked them to see if they couldn't give us some help in this regard, okay? So actually, we just sent some letters out to that effect as we are working on this particular budget for the next year. So, but the point I wanted to make was that once you have a contract in place, and I'm sure many of you work in places where you're either a part of a bargaining unit or part of a group where there's a contract with the employer. We have the same situation here. Go ahead.
I have more comments on that also. Are you not further ahead, rather than lay off people, to take and cut your percentage raise and keep those people? Next year or 5 years down the road, when you have more students coming into your school district, you're going to have to go back and hire more teachers. So that is a point you should be thinking of without cutting any money anywhere.
Making a suggestion, sir.
Now, another thing I want to know, what is the percentage of this budget that is mandated by the state?
Wow, that's a wonderful
Last year's
question.
budget.
That's a very good question. If you're, my belief is it's somewhere between 95 and 97%.
Where in any business do you pay less than half the budget and you control all the sales?
You control all the...
Where else would you, in any business situation, would you put 50 cents on the dollar into the pot and control whatever 100% of what's being done? Or very close to it.
Well,
how much of that mandated stuff did we just say we're not going to do?
those are, see, that's why they're on the list. Because some of those items add to the basic education, but for most of us, we consider it part of the basic education. Okay? Those are the few things that you could do something about. Just to pick one, I'm not picking on special education. Special education is a mandated area. All of the instructional areas, for example, 3 years of foreign language, that's mandated. Okay? So most of the budget, these are mandated items required for a student to get a high school diploma, now a Regents diploma. Everybody's going to have to pass 5 Regents for a high school diploma, Regents diploma now. But the standards are much higher, but it's
I don't have any problem with the education part.
Yes.
But there are other mandates that are issued by the state. You mentioned them yourself, the reflective tape on the buses.
Yes.
The arms on the buses, and there was no money that came into that.
Yeah, okay. Got a little money in those, but the ones on the EEDs...
There wasn't enough to pay for it.
No money. That's correct. That's correct.
And the third thing that I wanted to mention was, rather than cut these extracurricular activities, some of them are very low cost. Like sports, for example, you can split up to 10 sports with a cost per sport, $15,000, $20,000, whatever.
Yes, sir.
Would it not be better to propose to the parents to put some money toward it for their own kids who are playing, rather than put it into a tax situation where everybody pays towards it?
Well, that question was asked a couple times in the last few days, and we're just looking into what is possible there, if it's even lawful to do it. I don't know if you've heard this expression before, but what the public schools are all about. It's about a free and appropriate education for all of our children through age 21 or until they get a high school diploma. A free and appropriate education. And that includes the art, the music, the phys ed, interscholastic athletics, all the other programs that are included in our budget. And if we didn't feel they were important to a well-rounded education, it wouldn't be in the budget.
Now, what would happen if you refuse to do those mandates?
If you did what, sir?
What happens if you refuse to do a mandate?
Well, you could be subject to a withholding of your state aid, at the very least.
I'm just curious, nobody's ever told us what would happen to that.
Well, we've
I'm
asked
sure
that
it's like
question.
everything else, it depends on what you're deciding you're not going to do.
Yeah. You could be subject to a withholding of your state aid. You can have challenges by parents because you're supposed to offer this and that, and you're not offering this basic education as required by the state of New York. So you could be subject to challenges for not offering certain programs that are part of the core curriculum. And that's an issue here. We are trying to preserve the core curriculum, the core educational program for our students. It's an important question you're asking.
Well, I'm mostly, as you know, through my letter, I was concerned with the kindergarten program, and I'm not going to get into that, but what I'm dead while they're working the rest of their curriculum. What I'm afraid of is that it's going to get so bad that the teachers are going to say, okay, here's your dinner sheet, here's your thing of crayons, this is your art for the day. Well, we're singing the national anthem, there's your music for the day. Let's go outside at the recess, there's your kickball, or there's your present for the day. I also don't think it's fair that the students or the teachers constantly be with one another. The teachers need breaks. I go to my daughter's school and help out at activities. 23 kids, 23 7-year-olds. I get more tired going to that school helping out than I do my own job. And so they're saying to cut down the raises for these teachers. These teachers do so much, and I think a lot of these people here don't realize how much our teachers really do for our children. I mean, if the kids have something wrong with spelling or math, the first thing the parents are they're on the phone with the teacher saying, what's happening, what's happening? I mean, yes, the teachers, they should have a cut in the raise. I hate to see that, but I can't see raises going specifically out from that. I mean, it's just, and I hate the fact that teachers, I think teachers need their breaks, they need their planning breaks, they need to have a special time to do their curriculum. It's not fair for them and it's not fair for the students.
Thank you, sir.
Stop short again. I think, speaking on your budget again, there's other places that you, like, is it necessary that you have 5 secretaries and a business manager? You have a business manager, why do you need 5 secretaries? And if somebody spoke on detention, do we need a 68-passenger bus to bring back our kids? We should leave that up to the parents for those troubled kids. Another thing I would like to know is our New York State lottery money, where's that in the budget? We don't see it. Where is it? Where's the aid or the money coming back from the New York State? I mean, I sell a lot of lottery tickets myself. It's supposed to go back to the schools. How much of that money comes to this district?
I'm making notes here, and I'll answer you in just a second. Go right ahead.
We have 2 principals. I mean, talking about cuts, maybe we could go to 1 principal between 2 buildings. We could save there. I mean, there's another idea of cutting back. I mean, I'm just throwing ideas at you as a budget officer myself, and I hate to see anybody lose their job or our community to lose our school. I mean, I'm looking to save our school. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I don't know how much time you want me to spend on it, but let me be very brief. Don't know where you got the notion about 5 secretaries, but we have 5 people who work in the district business office area. 1 person to take care of payroll, retirement, all human resources for 230 or 40 employees. I can assure you that person's busy 40-plus hours a week. If you know anything about what's involved in doing payroll for people, 1 person to do that. We have 1 person that takes care of the development of the budget and do all the purchase orders, requisitions, track all that stuff. Huge task, 1 person doing that. 1 person and 2/5 of another person to do all the accounting for $20 million worth of action, plus $600,000 worth of grants, plus following all the debt service and capital projects that we're into, and so forth. 1 person plus part of another to do that. And 1 person to deal with all of the food service issues, coordinate all the free and reduced lunch program and monitors. One of the gentlemen asked about private contracting. Our food service is private contracted, not the transportation, but food service. So that's just a quick answer on that, okay? They're very busy people. Come over and check it out. I'm happy to show you around. The second one, something about ASD. ASD? What was that one about? Oh, thank you. Thank you. The law says the students are entitled to a ride to and from school every day. So if we're keeping for ASD, they must have a ride home. It's provided by the school. Goes back to that free and appropriate education. Some students who live 25 miles from the school couldn't get to school without a bus ride, couldn't get home without a bus ride, couldn't participate in any of our extracurricular activities without a bus ride.
And we should, excuse me, we should just suspend them for maybe 2 days and have home suspension instead of keeping them at our schools.
Yeah.
We're mandated to give them a ride to and from school.
Right.
We give a ride to school at 8 o'clock. We give a ride home at 3 o'clock. They have the ride to and from school at that point. If they choose to do wrong while they're here, then the parent and the child should suffer consequences. You are still doing the mandated law and providing the ride to and from school. So the ride home at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, whatever time after school is done, is uncounted.
I wish we had that flexibility and so forth. However, there are court rulings and decisions made other places that would be at variance with what you just said. Okay, so
I'd like to see it 'cause from where I can at. I'm not from around here, but in my old school district, it was set up just
I
like
understand. You know, I'm just sharing with you. That's all been checked out. And we do try to meet our obligations vis-a-vis New York State education law and the other rules and regulations that we have to go by. Lottery aid. Let me touch on the lottery aid for a second. In the year 2000, 2001, we received bear with me 1 second. We received $990,986 in lottery aid, 2000, 2001. In 2001, 2002, it went up to $1,160,561. This year, it was back to $990,986 because of the way they constructed the state aid formulas and giving us the amount of money to operate the schools this year. Who knows what it will be next year? Now, there's another piece to that we need to talk about, though, and I think you were kind of alluding to it. Lottery aid was supposed to be money that was extra, to provide extra things for the schools. But over the course of time, it's become a part of our aid. So some of the dollars, my take on this, my personal take, that were supposed to go to the schools are going to other programs and services statewide or are supplementing or what's the word I'm looking for, offsetting the cost that otherwise would accrue to other programs. It's not all going to education as it was billed in the early days of it back in the mid-'70s to the late '70s. And finally, one principal, 2 buildings. There's education law about that. You've got to have a principal in every building, which goes to a comment that's been made, a couple of comments that have been made tonight. So we're going to move along because we've got a lot of questions here. The gentleman over here would like to ask one, and then I'm going to go to you, sir.
My name's Chuck Connor, and I'm a trustee for the Village of Champlain. And I'd just like to also add my support to keeping the Champlain School open. This gentleman over here had mentioned he'd like to see the breakdown of that $750,000. That would be savings towards that school. I would also.
Sure.
I'd like to see how those children would be absorbed into the Rouse's Point and Morris schools. Is there room? That's something we haven't heard. I'd like to know all the information regarding that. You're going to have added transportation costs to get these kids from Rouse's Point to Morris, Champlain to Rouse's Point, Champlain to Morris. There's all types of scenarios. And I just wonder if that was factored in there. So the school is going to have to be maintained, and you're still going to have heat in the wintertime, so you won't have problems in the building. You're still going to have to maintain the grounds. So what would those costs be? What do you have planned to do with the school? You can't sell it right away. from what I understand. So, I mean, these are things that I'd like to know. I'm sure other taxpayers would also. There's another issue. The trailer's been sitting in the back of the school for years with things stored in them. What are we paying for those trailers for rental each year? And the school bus, which is, gradually going to fall over because it's sinking into the people come from other schools to our school for different events, and it's a disaster back there. I think it's a bad impression on our school, and I think something should be done with that. And by having those trailers, just having things stored in them, I don't think that's the real answer. And my third thing is that I do support sports for the school. I think it's an educational experience in itself. If you look at the students that are involved in sports, a majority of them are on the honor roll. They're good students, and I think that is a good part of the school system and educational experience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay. Just real quick answers, because I know, just to give you some response. I think about $70 or $80 a month for the trailer, and we have a desperate shortage of storage space in the district. Some of the reasons on it, we hope to get rid of them as soon as we can get some storage. So,
What about all the bricks and the fencing and stuff that's just been laying there for years?
it needs to be moved. Thank you for the suggestion. Okay, in sports, I think you probably just made a comment about that and so on. Okay, so there's a gentleman back here that wants to make a comment. Go ahead, sir.
Don Barrett. I'm intrigued about this 4-day school week.
Yes.
Do you have any feedback from the Rochester schools on this? Do you have any figures on what that could save the district?
Not yet.
If we went to something like that.
We're just looking into it.
So you're not sure of anything on that?
No. No, I'll tell you what the general theory is, okay? We know that the state says you must have 180 minutes of instruction in a core subject, like English, I'll just use English as an example, a week. We offer about 210 minutes, okay? So if money is all that tight and you're looking for options to preserve as much of your program as you can, we're going to cut back a little bit and then save on some salaries and so on. There are some problems with it. The state says you've got to have 180 days of instruction for the kids. So the state gives you a variance to run maybe 4 longer days or just do the 180 minutes rather than 210. Another option would be to have 5 shortened school days at 38 minutes a class instead of 42 or 45. These are things we're just beginning to look into. Hundreds of schools do them across the country, do this kind of thing across the country, because they're all running into the same situation that we're here tonight to talk about. We don't have much information yet about it, but we made some calls to Rochester, and we're hoping to contact the right people and to take a look at what the possibilities are. We're also looking at, and of course, some of these things would require us sitting down with the affected employee groups and to negotiate the impact of that. I'll give you another thing we're looking at. We're looking at 6 periods of instruction a day in middle high school. If we had 6 periods of instruction a day in the middle high school, that means the people who are involved in the instruction there and so forth, they're going to have to work a lot harder, and they're going to have less time to deal with planning and all the other things that go on in the life of an educator. Okay, so but the benefits to looking at that would be smaller class sizes, less cost, more electives for kids, and I'm probably missing 2 or 3 other very important ones that we're just not hitting at the moment. So we're looking at it because it's a new day. Things are different.
Could that decrease in transportation costs as well? 6 days of transportation.
6 periods of instruction or the short day?
No, shortened week.
Shortened week? Sure. I mean, there are lots of different ways of looking at that. Now, let's see. Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Ted Dell.
former several-term trustee for the village of Champlain, and a bunch of local politicians here. And I can appreciate certainly from where the board is coming from, because I can see that they're taking a lot of notes. I've heard a lot of great ideas, and I think they're picking up some good ones. Hopefully they'll write it off what I'm talking about, because I think it's important. I have a number of topics to cover, not too many. One just came to pass as I was sitting here, and that is the Ames building, which is currently vacant. I'm listening to the fact that there's very little storage, and I think either working in cooperation perhaps with the village or the bankruptcy court to put in a bid for that kind of space. A taxing entity may be able to acquire that very inexpensively. Then again, there's going to be the maintenance of the facility, and what the board would do with that, that's up to you guys to figure out. In any event, the other thing that I'm curious about, which maybe you can mention when I'm done speaking, or whenever you choose, Chris, I think you said there's 6 buses coming in. I'm curious about the 6 buses that are going out. When might they go out to bid? We've discussed in some detail about educational programs for the kids. I, in particular, as a father who's got two children in the district, has had an objection to the curriculum related to the health and AIDS prevention, which I did discuss with the administration in an effort to resolve. The board ultimately is responsible for ensuring that the health and AIDS prevention program is, of course, consistent with state law. I believe if it's not, the insurance companies will not, in fact, cover the liabilities. From that aspect, I think it's a very serious issue. On the second issue, I really do think that as administrators of that program, it should be closely evaluated. I watched Lieutenant Jeff as the crowd listened earlier. I have a self-protection program, and we found it, as well as a number of other children, objectionable, and they didn't want to attend. So I did speak with Jackie Keller, the school's attorney, for about 40 minutes, who at the time she was unfamiliar with the policy there. But I do think that aspect of the insurance is one that is important and can absolutely devastate the budget in one budget cycle. Along that line, I think what should be looked at is what's widely publicized by Bush, Title 10 and Title 5. That could have the title wrong, but that's totally fully funded programs that could take the health and AIDS prevention programs, which is, as far as I know, is 2 positions, and universally pay for those teachers to teach. You know, I don't know what the teachers make. That's got to be $80,000, something like that. That's real money that can be used for other programs as well. I think that's a good idea that should be looked into. Lastly, something that I think might be a bit difficult, maybe even acrimonious, for the board to deal with, deals with the issue of salaries and salary renegotiation. If one were to look at the salary contract that's taken place over 3 years, just because the contract has already been fixed doesn't mean you can't refix it or change the term. Maybe say we need to for this reason, because the contracts really aren't consistent with community values. I think there's a lot of people here who hold this school very dear. I've chosen to bring my kids here for a reason, and I want to see an excellent program for these kids. I don't want to see certain things cut from the program, and you know, if there's anything that we can do to provide for a fair and adequate salary, that would be important. I know as a village trustee, I always used to look at what are my constituents thinking, and I do see you folks writing, so I think maybe some of what I said may have been of some value. If you could answer my questions again.
Well, we're just going to take note of a suggestion about the Ames building. I don't have any comment on that, but take note of it. On the 6 buses, we have voter approval. We plan to put a sum of money into the budget to go ahead and buy those buses or finance them like you would a car. The cost is a little different one way or the other because there is aid involved in it. Of course, that's how things are today, but with the government proposal, it could change. So we are evaluating and reevaluating. We probably will not make a decision on whether we buy 6 or 4 or 2, depending on what we can afford and how the aid is on. We might have to go out, if we went out and bought 2, for example, and had to put the full cost of those in the budget. Or if we financed in the principal and interest for the first of 3 or 5 years how we did it, that might be all on the taxpayer. So what we might choose to do, it's a board decision in the end, is we might choose to wait until we see what the next budget looks like. If we could get by, without having to add those to the fleet, because we got some other buses that have to come off because they're 10 or 12 or 13 years old. So all of that has to be assessed. What's the most cost-effective way to do it? And look at all the other variables there. As far as the old ones going out, Mr. Minor, the transportation supervisor, when he's ready to part company with them, he will be over to the office and ask us to present those buses to the school board to be declared surplus and then put out to bid. They're all put out to bid. What he does, and you may be aware of it, is he will use some of the old buses, the parts and so forth, to keep the other buses running as a cost savings measure for the district. So the buses are always sold as is, okay? And they usually are pretty well worn by the time we declare them surplus and put them out for bids. I mean, it's always sealed bids and that sort of thing. Now, did find interesting the comment about Title 10 and Title 5. Thank you for the suggestion. I'm going to take a look at that and see if those are possibilities for federal grants in the district that could bring some dollars into the district. I appreciate that suggestion. Salary and salary negotiations, I'll make note of that. I happen very much to agree with the fact that you hold the school district dear, and we have an excellent program here, and I thank you for the comment. Thanks. Now, somebody else had a comment.
I'm glad you brought up that school bus bill. You know, I don't know how this ever happened, but we always voted on the school buses during the school budget time. Now you folks are doing it in the winter time when there's nobody goes to vote. How come that has changed? And I want to go back to where it's supposed to be in May.
In May. The reason we have done it is to save a few bucks. Usually the buses go up about 5, 6, 7% a year. And we tried to do it earlier, so if all goes well, we could make the order of the school buses and get them at maybe 5% less than they otherwise would be. And it takes about a year to get a school bus. So there too, it gives you time. I don't think it's half of our fleet now. We've been working very hard to modernize our fleet, but we had over half of the fleet for over 14 years on the buses. We had to accelerate the purchase of the buses. And so those are some of the factors that go into it, Bob.
Well,
we'll make note that you'll be interested in having it go back in May.
I want to go back in May because then you get the overall picture. Then you get down to the budget and say, oh, don't forget we got to pay for the buses. Got to add that into the package. So that's going to go back in May.
Thank you for the comment. I can tell you that lots of districts are doing what we're doing for the same reason. We'll make note of it. Thank you. Wayne?
Real quick question. When you made your initial speech at the beginning there, you were talking about revenue coming in and pilot agreements. I wasn't too much aware of that. Just curious where they come from and what amount they really come up to.
Okay. Well, first of all, we're not really involved in any of that. We're the recipients of some income for pilot agreements that are made between the development corporation and business or industry that wants to relocate here or expand their business. And what happens?
So it's like a tax in lieu of taxes.
Yeah. What happens is they give them a period of time to set up their business. There's certain tax advantages. They do, instead of paying taxes on the tax rolls initially, they make a payment in lieu of taxes, a partial payment, and we have many companies in the area that are doing that. The approximate income to the district annually is about $250,000.
Yeah, I misunderstood. You said pilot agreement. I wasn't sure what you're talking about. And what you're talking about is through LDC and IDA?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you were talking about some company coming in and giving you money to like have a time machine or something like that.
Oh,
No,
absolutely not.
we don't receive anything like that.
No. Foreign rights, we call that. No, we're not involved in any of that. Has everybody had a chance to ask a question they wanted to?
One other thing, you were talking about food and the food service that take care of the lunches and stuff.
Yes, sir.
Years ago, the district put in kitchens in Moores. I don't know if they did Champlain.
Yes, they all had
They
kitchen.
redid all the kitchens, and now we have a service come in and provide the food and lunches for the kids. I mean, we put all this money into these kitchens, and all they're used for is to heat food up and stuff. They don't cook nothing there, and it just makes me wonder, kind of curious.
Okay. Those kitchens that I think you're talking about were put in even before I got here, and I came here 24 years ago. They were here a while before I got here. So I would say about 30 years ago.
They tore those out.
Huh?
They tore those out.
Well, some of that was torn out even before I got here, okay? So I know what you're referring to. Then, over the years, there was still some equipment from that earlier time in the various buildings, but not used much, not really appropriate to the program. And for years, as you all know, basically the principal of the school, working with the staff, would make an arrangement for one of the local stores to bring over some Michigans or bring some submarine sandwiches, and we had that for our lunch program. The problem with that was that it did not address the issue of the children who didn't have the $1.25 or $1.50, whatever it happened to be. The National School Lunch Program is what I'm referring to. So a number of years ago, we were able to get voter approval to build a central kitchen, 95% aid, might add, and we contracted for food service with Chartwells. And there's no cost for this program to the school district. Any revenues earned up to a ceiling is the income that they get. That's a contract that's negotiated with them. At first it's out for bids, and then it's negotiated here. Really, they can have a one-year contract and 4 renewals, but it must go out to bid. And the beauty of it is that we do not have to subsidize it from the general fund. There's more variety than you can have if you ran the program yourself. Just check around with other school districts and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's worked out really well for us.
There's one more thing I'd like to.
Sure.
It's just I'd like to get some information.
Sure.
I know the state mandates the food, what they serve. I know that it's different from what we teach in our schools from the triangle, the pyramid.
Yes.
And what this service provides and what they're allowed to serve. It's not the same as what that pyramid is, and what they teach in school.
Well, I think I would differ with you on it. I think I would differ with you on your comment, but I guess I would say it this way. We participate in the National School Lunch Program. This is a program that's administered by the State Education Department, the Child Nutrition Office down there. We participate in the free and reduced lunch program, and we get reimbursed at almost $2 a meal for every, what I call a Class A meal that is served to the children. And that supplements the money that's taken in at the cash register, okay? All of the meals served are checked by the State Education Department. They're going to be here within the week to look at all the menus and to see that all the right food groups are there and so forth. I'm not an expert in this, sir, but I feel that we're right on target with the State Education Department guidelines there. One thing we haven't gotten into yet, what we're looking at is the heart healthy program. But I think we're meeting the pyramid there quite nicely.
Basically, what I'm looking for is, I'm looking to get a copy of what the mandates are for that program, what they are allowed to serve.
Oh, well, if you call our office tomorrow, I will ask Kathy Evans to provide some information along those lines. Be happy to. And a lot of the nutritional analysis can be found on most of the menus that are put out too. I'm happy to do that for you. Now, somebody else had a question here. Yes, sir. Mr. Moore.
Hi, my name is Steve Flory. I have 3 daughters here in NCCS. I moved to Rouse's Point 2 years ago from Vermont, and when we had school budget problems in Vermont, we had the same style of meetings. And speaking of which, I support our teachers. When I was in Vermont, that was the first thing that everybody was out to cut. Yet, in the last 5 or 10 years, many people and most politicians and all presidents have clearly indicated that we want the best teachers and we're going to have to pay them. If you start cutting teachers' salaries, we're going to get less superior teachers or less quality. Basically, all of us are special interest groups. When you talk about your program cuts, and you certainly have your work cut out for you, and I trust in you, your staff, and the school board that you're going to work in our best interest, and I wish you good luck. My daughters play basketball, by the way, so as far as I'm concerned, you can cancel all sports programs except for girls basketball. I haven't heard anybody today or tonight speak about, I'm going to pay more taxes. And I just wanted to go on the record and be videotaped, I guess. We all live, most of us live pretty good. Most of us drive pretty nice cars. Many of us are going to Florida for a spring break and other trips. And I think we have to stand up and face that we're going to have to pay more taxes. And I'm willing to do that. If I have to work a little bit harder to do that, then I'll do so. My only question I have is, and I think you touched base with it earlier, on fundraising. If a certain specific program is cut, can we do fundraising? I'm not talking about girls basketball. I'm talking about some of the non-sport stuff. Can we do fundraising? Or is it, I think you were touching base on it. I'll let you answer that.
Well,
and then my last question would be how some of the bigger, or the universities and the colleges go after their alumni, specifically the ones that have done very well for themselves. And is that something that we can do, or is it not allowed for a public school? Could we start a alumni association of some sort to solicit people that have money, that have done well?
Foundation of some kind? Some kind of a foundation?
Right.
To answer your first question, if just use an example of if the student council, if it took $1,000 to operate the student council a year, could there be fundraising for that? Yes. The arrangement would have to be worked out with the school in advance on it, so we were communicating and knew exactly what was happening there. It's possible to do that. That require board approval. So it could be, if you're talking UN or outdoor education or some of these other very, very nice important programs that we have. Some of these we've had for 37 years. Yes, it's possible for that. Alumni foundations and so on, yes, they're possible. And that's something that we could chat about if anybody was interested in forming a group. There are alumni organizations established in some of the communities. Whether you're talking about working with the existing organizations or establishing a new organization, it's possible. And if there's an interest in doing that, you certainly could meet with school officials and to discuss it, and we could discuss it with the school board.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions?
I would actually just like to make another point. Someone mentioned like cutting ASD. I think that may be like a good idea because I've seen people just joke about it that it's not even a punishment anymore really. And then I've seen the same just like around school, having experience with the students that people joke about being suspended and stuff like that. And a guy said that when he was in school he had Bud Moore or whatever. Well, we have Mr. Oscar, and I don't really think that I want to spend a long period of time in his office. And another point that I'd like to make is somebody said cutting like the administrative positions. I think that since Mr. Roscoe came back, it's done a lot for the two principals. Mr. Mulligan can now do his job more efficiently because he doesn't have to worry about discipline problems. The same thing with our new principal, Mrs. Crowley. You want to stand up for us, Mrs. Crowley? And I seriously think that I definitely think that I've seen an improvement with the students and their attitude since Mr. Roscoe came back. So I think that he's done a great job here, and I hope he continues to do his job. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question they want to ask before we adjourn this evening? While you're thinking about that, do you have a question?
I just wanted to say everybody needs to make photocopies of these addresses and write to as many senators, write to Governor Pataki, ask him what he ate for breakfast to come up with this idea of cutting state aid.
And you will get a response, because I have written to the senators and assembly, and I did receive a letter from Chris Orloff today, so you can get a response.
You know, we want to raise the standards for our children. Now they need a Regents diploma. You know, you see kids struggling through school, but yet the state wants to cut back on aid, and cutting back on state aid for schooling is not the answer. Cutting back on the simple programs is not the answer. It just, I don't know. Everything was said tonight that it makes sense to consider closing certain buildings, consolidation. You know, it's not a popular choice, but it needs to be seriously considered. You know, our education for our children is what is number one. Cutting the simple programs may just put a Band-Aid on it. It's not going to solve in the long-term problems. We need to really consider how much money is going into maintaining so many different buildings. Consolidation has been done in other school districts. My husband went to Altona Elementary School, and he now works at Altona Correctional Facility. He had to go to NEC. It was done. There was a lot of problems at the time. A lot of people did not like it, but it was done. And NEC seems to be doing very well. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I encourage everybody to write to their assembly people.
And the addresses are right out on the table. I should make the point, because the question was asked this afternoon, regarding the 5-year facility study. That work continues, but it's been slowed down a little bit because we're spending a lot of time developing the budget for next year, and you can imagine how time-consuming it is in light of the circumstances. So that work will continue, and that's a long-range plan for modernizing our facilities, making sure they're very, very efficient. And another point that was made this afternoon is any possibility of a new building project will have to be carefully analyzed, because they're changing the way that they distribute the building aid now, and there's a 6-step prioritization as to whether you get the money or not. So it's no longer what they refer to as an entitlement. It's now going to be done on a priority basis. If you have a 50-year-old building, you'd probably be higher on the list. If you had a growing enrollment and your building was crowded, you'd be higher on the list. But if you just wanted maybe a new auditorium or a gym, you'd probably be 6th on the list, you know. And when the money's available, then you probably would be able to do that work. But they're only going to set aside a certain amount of money each year for new building construction and reconstruction. And the aid back to the districts, in our case, it's like 95%, and it might now be 80 or 85%. So that'll all be looked into over the course of the next year or two.
When you write to your legislators, please include a line that says, do your job and give us an on-time budget, so that when we go to you and ask you to pass our budget, we know what kind of state aid we're getting, and we're not dealing with magic figures that we have no control over. Please add that line. Their job is to get a budget on time. Taki promised that 8 years ago, and he's never delivered. It's time that they're held accountable.
Okay.
Please.
Okay, there's a question in the back there.
I just have one comment.
I want to thank you all very, very much for coming this evening. We're concerned about the school budget, and please keep us in mind when we have a budget meeting on March 3rd and the other meetings to come. Have a great evening.